Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Hamley. Since its inception, the National Association of Black Journalists, the largest organization of journalists of color in the world, has invited presidential candidates to its annual conventions. But the invitation and appearance of presidential hopeful Donald Trump caused controversy, with their journalists divided on the appropriateness of the Republican candidate known for his racist comments to address the group. So what happens when journalism and racism collide? We have a stellar panel of journalists to answer that question, so stay tuned. Another View will be right back after this national, regional, and local news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Hamley. Let me begin by thanking everyone who last week joined the Another View family by becoming a member of WHRO Public Media. We could not do this show without your support, so thank you, thank you, thank you. We met and exceeded our goals, so we are very happy about that. Today, we have an awesome panel of outstanding journalists with us to talk about racism and journalism. But we begin with condolences to family and friends of former U.S. Ambassador, decorated Vietnam War hero, and Portsmouth native Bismarck Myrick, who passed away this week. Our Lisa Godley has a tribute.
A native of Portsmouth, Virginia, and a 1959 graduate of I.C. Norcom High School, retired U.S. Ambassador Bismarck Myrick lived a life of service to both his country and his community. He entered the U.S. Army right after graduation as a private and would spend the next 20 years serving his country. His amazing career would take him to Vietnam, Germany, Korea, Japan, and Ethiopia. During the Vietnam War, he saw intense combat, and as a result, received a Meritorious Service Medal, the Purple Heart, several Bronze Stars, and the Silver Star. While continuing to serve his country, he earned his Bachelor of Arts in History from Tampa University and would later earn an M.A. in History from Syracuse University. Upon his honorable discharge, he joined the U.S. Foreign Service and was nominated by U.S. presidents to serve as ambassador to the Kingdom of Lesotho in 1995 and the Republic of Liberia in 1999. Ambassador Myrick also led the U.S. diplomatic mission to Durban, South Africa. Upon his retirement, he taught at Old Dominion University for more than 22 years. 2 years ago, he shared his list of considerations for success in life on the Tidewater Community College VSC YouTube channel. And this is just some of what he had to say.
Respect yourself and others. Invest time and energy in developing your intellectual and educational skills. Seek and cultivate relations with respected mentors. Associate with those who share your good values.
An avid runner, Ambassador Myrick loved spending time with friends and family and hosting events like his annual Thanksgiving celebration in Portsmouth. His joy, generosity, and devotion are being remembered across the oceans and right here in Hampton Roads. Ambassador Myrick passed away on Sunday, September 29th, surrounded by his wife and children. He was 83. For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And the celebration of life for Ambassador Myrick will take place on Saturday, October the 12th at 11 at Third Baptist Church, 461 Goodwin Street in Portsmouth. Interment arrangements will take place in Arlington National Cemetery at a date yet to be determined. And I send my personal condolences as the Myricks and my husband Maxie and I were friends. We'll be right back. And welcome back. According to the Society of Professional Journalists, an ethical journalist acts with integrity. An ethical journalist does the following: seeks truth and reports it, minimizes harm, acts independently, and is to be accountable and transparent. But how do you maintain your professionalism as a Black journalist while reporting about racism? How do you separate the personal from the professional? Let's ask our panelists, Director of Equity Production and Outreach and producer of Another View, Lisa Godley. It's good to see you on the other side of the table.
That's right. I'm out of the room and I'm over here now. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Former president of the National Association of Black Journalists and retired News 3 anchor, Barbara Ciara. Hey, Barbara.
It's good to see you, Barbara, and the rest of the esteemed panel.
And Roger Chesley is a contributing columnist for the Virginia Mercury and a freelance writer. He's a former columnist and editorial writer for the Virginian Pilot and the Daily Press. Hey, Roger.
How are you doing
and
today?
An original OG for the Round Table.
Yep.
There you go. And joining us by phone is Dr. Wil LaVeist, a former columnist and talk radio host in Hampton Roads, now educator, author, and media consultant based in Philadelphia. How you doing, Will?
Always a pleasure, Barbara. I'm jealous. You got Lisa on the other side of the wall. I'm jealous. I can't be there to see that.
I know. We wish you were here, but we're glad you're with us on the phone. And before we get started, I also want to let you all know that we are honored today to have Professor Emeritus of the Department of Mass Communications and Journalism at Norfolk State University, Dr. Grady James, who is seated in our control room. He is watching the show with us today. Dr. James, we are so happy to have you with us today. So I do want to start by reminding our audience, we are a bunch of seasoned journalists in this discussion today. However, we did try to get a younger journalist who may be earlier in his or her career to join us, but they declined, citing fearing retribution from their respective media or outlets. So that's why they're not here with us today. But we do have some perspectives because there was lots of chatter that happened at NABJ. So, Lisa, since you were in the room.
The room where it happened.
The room where it happened. Yeah. Can you kind of set the stage for what was going on at NABJ this summer back in July? Was it July? Yeah, July. When Donald Trump came to speak to the organization.
Well, we those who wanted to be there made sure they were in line. It took us a little time to get in there. We had to go through Secret Service to get into the room, and once we got in there, we sat a little bit. There was a little bit of a delay, and then the event began.
And then it started. Now, Barbie, you went to the convention, but you weren't in the room.
No, I got in the tail end when people were leaving the event and heard a lot of conversation. And I was texting Lisa during the event.
Okay, now Roger and Will, you guys were not at the convention, correct?
I was not at the convention this year. Although I am an NABJ member, though, and have been going on 38, 40 years, I guess.
Wow. Okay, so almost from the beginning.
No, the beginning would have been... The beginning, I was still in high school. You're older than me. Don't even try it.
Okay.
He's a little sensitive.
See, there's no feelings in there, right, Will?
Okay.
I'm not going to date myself like Roger, but I did join NABJ when I was in college at the Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, and I'm also one of the founding members of the NABJ chapter in Phoenix, Arizona Association of Black Journalists.
Okay, so Barbara, since you were a former president, the invitation itself was not unusual, or was it?
It's traditional, actually. what we do as an organization, association of journalists, is we invite all views of presidential candidates who are running during presidential years to come and speak before our group. And there are layers to why that's important. There are many journalists, young journalists, who have never been exposed to candidates who are on the stump running for the highest office. It gives them the exposure they need getting into their careers. And it's also an opportunity to address issues that are unique to our community with those people who are running for office.
Mm-hmm. So, Lisa, you had a room full of journalists. Mm-hmm. You would think it should have been, got my professional journalism hat on and I'm going after them. I want to hear and make sure that he's telling the truth and that he's answering the questions and so forth. But there was a lot of angst. What were the reactions that people had?
Oh, it depends on who you talk to. Mm-hmm. I came across a lot of journalists, even leading up to it. A couple of them said to me, if I had known he was going to be here, I would have come later. There were a few that said, I just don't think this was a good idea. I don't think they should have brought him here. I'm talking the younger journalists. The older journalists seem to get it. Mm-hmm. They seem to understand that this is an opportunity to be in a room with someone and ask those questions. But the younger ones, I even heard some in the elevator say, well, we're just going to go outside and join the protest. And I was like, aren't you a journalist? That's not a good thing, And they were like, who is this woman trying to tell us what to do? But, it was quite interesting.
So where's the disconnect, Roger, do you think?
Oh, I'm not sure where the disconnect is, but you have to also understand that the convention is more than just a gathering place. It is sustenance in a sense to people who are starting out, people who have been in the business. You probably let some of your guard down when you go to the convention because you're seeing old friends, colleagues you've worked with before. Mm-hmm. You oftentimes when you return to your home newspaper broadcast outlet, you have a sense of uplift. You have a sense of batteries recharged. And so when you throw something like this into the mix, it's bound to cause a bit of dissension, and it's bound to cause just why is he here? Why did we invite him? We know this man is a liar. He spent 4 years in office lying. What do we, to me, nobody asked me, this was up to the folks who organized the convention, whether these invitations were going to be sent out. And nobody asked me about that, and I didn't expect them to. But I knew the setting was not good. It was, if you have been lying all along, you're not going to change when you get in front of this particular crowd. He lies in front of his own followers. So why did we think that we were going to be able to hold his feet to the fire here in this particular setting? I didn't think that there was anything really to gain from the invitation. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting. I looked to see if he had actually been invited in 2016 and 2020, and a report came out that yes, and he turned him down. So this means he thought he needed the convention goers more than we needed him this year, obviously. I just didn't see where this was a good idea. I figured we were giving him a platform that he didn't deserve. And that has nothing to do with whether I'm a black journalist or a white journalist. It has with what we know he does, with what he does on stage. I think you can divorce. He has made racist statements and anti-black statements in the past. You can divorce yourself from that. My problem was we are not going to get him to do anything he doesn't want to do. He is going to spout the same types of rhetoric, the same types of comments that he does all along. And in that way, I felt like we gave him a platform that he didn't deserve.
Right. Wil, can you easily divorce yourself from how you feel about him personally versus covering him professionally?
No, I don't think you can easily do it, but I think that it's a must that you have to do. Mm-hmm. And your training and understanding of the principles of journalism is supposed to guide you in that. And then also having a good sense of the history of black journalism and our black journalists and what our mission has always been. The mission has always been about access. I mean, that's 18 27, Rush from and Corners, Freedom's Journal, excuse me. That's the first black newspaper, it's the first black media. We've always fought to have access, fought for liberation, fought to have access in the ear of presidents. So you got Frederick Douglass, right? North Star. He's speaking to President Lincoln. You got William Monroe Trotter, right? I was a columnist, member of the Trotter Group. We were named for as a group of black columnists, named for William Monroe Trotter, who challenged Woodrow Wilson. So when you understand that, and then you bring it forward even to why NABJ was founded, and the giants that founded that organization. I mean, it's about access. It's about advocacy, but advocacy in a way of fairness and telling our story as African Americans in this country, as people of African descent across the world. You never give up that access. In our challenge and our position has always been that we do it the way that it should be done, the way that is taught in school. The way I learned at Lincoln University and the University of Arizona journalism department. That's how we do journalism as black journalists. So it's actually troubling to me that some of the younger ones felt that they couldn't even come on your show today. I mean, I can't imagine when I was a columnist at the Daily Press, all the racism I faced in the newsroom and outside the newsroom, that management would not want me to participate in this kind of discussion. Tribune's management. That's troubling to me, and it just speaks to the era that we're in, with the internet and fragmentation and how journalism has, evolved or devolved, depending on, where you want perspective on stand. Yeah.
Barbara, was this about Trump or was it about Republicans? Because there have been other Republican candidates that have come.
Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, George Bush. Yes, this was about Trump specifically. But there's also been pushback when we've had other Republicans invited to NABJ and the convention with respect to policy issues that some people had about the party. So there's always been lively discussion about why is this person invited into the room with respect to that. But to the point that Lisa was making earlier, there's divergent opinion among the membership. You can't say everyone felt one way. Right. There were many different attitudes about the invitation to Trump, why it was important or why some felt it wasn't.
Lisa, though, you said that there was some young journalists who said, I want to go out and protest. Where is, when you look at what journalists are supposed to do,
right.
Where does that come from? Do you think that's a product of because we have so much opinion as opposed to news and journalism?
I think that plays a role
confused
in it, and I think it also has to do with the era in which we learned to cover journalism. We have a standard. There was the older journalists. We have a standard. There's something. This is what we were taught when we were in school. This is how you cover the news. It's an unbiased, and nobody is going to say that each time you cover something, it's going to be an easy issue to cover. I've had to cover Klan rallies in my career.
Hello.
I was going to ask you about
Did I want to be there? Absolutely not. But it was an assignment that I had to cover. So it's just like, you learn to deal with and process whatever you're going through. Talk to us a little bit
about when you had to cover that Klan rally. What did you say?
I've done it twice, actually.
What did you say to yourself? How did you compartmentalize so that you could do your job?
Well, actually, the first time I was a very young journalist. I had just started out in my career, and I was working in Lynchburg, Virginia at the time. Yeah,
great game.
Wow.
Exactly.
Wow.
And
No pun intended.
the assignment editor,
no pun intended.
The assignment editor looked at myself and another reporter who was also African American and said, you guys, there's a Klan rally. We need you guys to go out there and head out, and make sure that this is covered. And I looked at him and said, "You talking to us?" And it was like, well, you guys are the only ones here, and we need to go out there. And it turned turned out actually to be okay because of folks in the city were like, we don't want you here. So it was more people supporting, not having this group walk through downtown than it was, the group itself. So that was okay. And then there was another time, I believe it was up in Yorktown. I can't remember. It was way up somewhere past Williamsburg. There was an event when I was working at Channel 3, and I went up to cover it. And I was the only Black reporter in the troop of the group that went up there to cover that. And that was very, very uncomfortable for me. And actually, it was a colleague of mine that said, I can hold your mic, and because they weren't talking to me.
Wow.
They weren't talking to me. So, she was like, I can hold your mic and I'll ask questions for you and, that kind of thing. And which made that, a doable event for me.
So in other words, you wouldn't have been able to get the story had the other
I would have had to say I tried to talk to this person and they would not, respond. And I'm taking in the things that I'm seeing, the children running around in their white robes and playing, and I'm processing all this stuff. I'm like, okay, here comes another generation. And
this speaks to why it's important for African Americans in journalism to talk about these things, because our other colleagues of different hues do not have that experience, and it's important to understand that it's a different walk for us. Was that ever a story, Barbara, in your career that you had to gird yourself, if you will, in terms of covering it because there was some racist element to it? Yes, when I was called the N-word by, there was a small town on the outskirts of Tucson back in the 70s, and I was very young in my career, and they sent me out there because the fire chief didn't want blacks or women to be in his fire department. He was finding that he was having to expand the employment pool, which he didn't want to do. I went down there to cover that, and I asked him why he was taking this position. He says, it's simple. I don't want the N's and the women in here. And so having that echo through my head while I'm interviewing this man was very, very difficult to maintain my composure. But came back, did the story, he's fired. So, free speech, but there are consequences.
Yeah. What about you, Roger?
What I was just going to say is that I'm glad we have the opportunity to be in the room, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how uncomfortable it can be at sometimes, because I want to have those opportunities. And I remember having conversations, when I first started as a columnist at the Virginian Pilot, that, well, this is an incident that involves black people, so you should want to cover. I said, well, I don't mind covering that, but I am not just that. And the flip side of that is white reporters, Asian reporters, should be interested in covering things that involve black people too. It doesn't have to be just one thing. I want to be able to talk about all sorts of things. I'm a father, husband, go to church, tried to play sports, but my knees, are not very strong now. So, we are a range of things. We are not only one thing. And the flip side of that is that when I was in Detroit, a majority black city, a lot of times you would have people in the community that think you're going to favor us because we're a black person. So if we do something messed up, if we cheat, well, you're going to give us a pass on that, right? No, it doesn't work that way. We put our lens to you, and, we're looking for truth, accuracy, and fairness, of sure. But we're not going to cover up the things that you do illegally or just plain wrong. So,
what about you, Wil? Anything? Were there any stories or opportunities where you had to, say to yourself, "All right, I'm going in here, but this is what I got to do."
Absolutely. Between working in Arizona and working down there in Hampton, absolutely, there were plenty of opportunities for that. I remember coming to Hampton as a columnist and folks telling me, "Don't go out to Fox Hill." That's the sundown south. Don't go out Fox Hill area.
Oh wow!
And they had a Confederate a parade out there, and I covered it. And I went out there and I was at Van Ness Bastrop and sat down because that's a Republican stronghold and so forth. And I sat down and actually spent time with folk and had real conversations to get a real understanding. I mean, and the way I see us as Black journalists is that we're taught to cover the basics of journalism, just like our white counterparts, and then we bring this additional perspective that is often missing from the news. So when Lisa talks about going to a Klan rally, absolutely, that's what we're supposed to be able to do. And because of Lisa's background, she's going to be seeing things and have a perspective on things to pay attention to that our white counterparts often would not pay attention to at such a rally. And that's the benefit. That's the additional benefit that we bring to the table. Quickly, in Arizona, I had a flip on that. Is I could recall being in a newsroom and having a white colleague saying, the south side of Phoenix is traditionally the Black community. That's always the case in all cities, the south side. So it's where Black people live, right? And there was a story going on out there, and the colleague was like, well, I can't go out there and cover it, because they're not going to talk to me. Meanwhile, here I'm covering two communities, El Mirage, which is majority Mexican-American, and Sun City, which is a white retirement community. Now, you all know in the room, I was expected to go in those communities, get the story, and you better meet your deadline.
It's always a different standard.
Right, the white counterpart, it was okay. It was acceptable that, they're not going to talk to them. And that's where I think is a nuance that often is not talked about. That it's our white counterparts a lot of times that get the pass, and we don't. And if we make one mistake, oh my God, you done.
Under the bus you go.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about covering race and racism as an African-American journalist with broadcast and print journalists Lisa Godley, Barbara Ciara, Roger Chesley, and Dr. Wil LaVeist. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Let's pick up where Wil left off, Barbara.
Well, Wil brought up something about how sad it made him that one of the younger journalists couldn't join us because of fear of retribution with their employer. This has been happening to NABJ members who advocate for what we do at NABJ. I never will forget back in 2007 when I appeared on Network News talking about NABJ's position on Don Imus in 2007 when he called the Rutgers female basketball team nappy-headed hoes. And to that point, we went after those sponsors, we made public statements, and then my television station was then owned by the New York Times. I get called in and told that I need to temper my remarks because they are crossing the line. When I had been told when I was running for office that they would support the advocacy that was the mission statement of NABJ. So you are held to a different standard. I decided to take the risk and keep talking because that's what my membership elected me to do. But it was a risk.
Yeah. Roger.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's funny the double standards that Black journalists have to face. Now, in 2008, when Barack Obama was running for president, we were told by my then editor there that if you are not he was having a rally, I think it was at the convention center in Virginia Beach, and if you were not covering the event, you could not go to just see him. That even if you just wanted to get string or be a part of this or just, kind of see this as something
historical.
Right.
And
you could not do it because we have to be concerned about our ethical approach. Now, I got there in 2000, 2004 and 2004, there had been no message like that going out. And so it seemed to me that...
So in other words, they didn't tell, because it was a white candidate, they didn't say, journalists, you can't go.
Right.
Okay,
So,
got you.
So it seems like we always get put in this trick bag. If a white person is covering a white candidate, well, they're not going to favor that white candidate. But if a black person is covering a black candidate, well, they're crossing the line.
Absolutely.
You know, we are professional enough, smart enough, and have learned enough about this business that we know what we're supposed to do in certain situations. And all of us in the room, obviously having decades in the business, we know what the rules are. But it was just curious that that directive came down that particular year.
Barbara?
It is very curious because I do think that, and I'll keep saying this, that I believe in my experience after 50 years that we are and still held to a different standard. And what Roger's saying is true. None of those directives go out to the general population in the newsroom about how to behave and what to do unless color is introduced into the conversation. And then there's a noticeable reset on how they view African-American journalists and what your ability to be objective when you were taught by the same standard.
So I want to ask you guys, because Barack Obama becoming president was a very historical thing that happened, and there was a lot of decision making, I think, that black journalists had to make in terms of how they were going to cover him, how they were going to cover the event itself. I mean, I know for myself, I aired on the side of the history, and I put a bumper sticker on my car that, you know, it said Barack Obama president. You know, yes, I don't do signs in my yard. I don't go out, you know, to political events, you know, and all of that. But I decided that this was important enough that I wanted to do that. I just wonder what you guys were thinking or went through during that period. I'm going to start with you, Wil.
Yeah, for me it was interesting because I covered it. I was there in Denver when he accepted the nomination, but I also had the background of being in Chicago when President Obama ran against Bobby Rush, former House of Representatives, former Black Panther, and he got crushed, right? So to Roger's point, that being in Chicago, being in the community, you saw how these two candidates were covered as black candidates and covered based on, you know, their reputation, what they were saying, you know, basically the quality of their campaigns. And then, so to see President Obama at that point, it was a little amazing to me to see how he had risen like that. And how much people were putting their expectations on him. I remember being in the stadium and like, wow, I'm watching people and they're crying and all this, and I'm like, he's a regular politician. I mean, I just saw this guy.
You had
in
a whole
Chicago.
different perspective.
Yeah, I'm like, yo, this is that same dude that I saw, you know, and I actually met him. I met him and Michelle before I was at Ebony at the time, and they came. You all might remember before he announced there's a cover issue in Ebony, their Black Love they usually do in February, and I was there at the photo shoot when Michelle rolled up in there and Barack, and I got a chance to talk to him. We were, you know, a regular guy in the elevator. So for me, it was a little shocking and a little unnerving because it was like, you're kind of making him into, you know, he's Neo, you know, he's the one, and putting all these expectations, all these expectations on him that if you listen carefully what he's saying, he wasn't saying really any of that. It was like we were putting all it to the point where, you know, he gets a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, like, really? Wow. So that was like challenging to see that in his really natural state, and then to see how much had been put on him. I kind of fell for him in a way that I'm like, you're never going to meet these expectations.
Live up to the expectations.
At all. So yeah, I didn't go as far as you, Barbara, as you know, putting bumper stickers on my, you know, that was sacrilege.
No, I didn't.
You know,
that was sacrilege. I know.
I know.
And you know what? And I actually got called out about it. And you know, but it was a decision for me. I wasn't covering him on a regular basis. I wasn't in Chicago and so forth. I was looking at it more so of, this is history, and this is
Right.
huge. Lisa, what about you?
Well, I didn't cover him on a regular basis either. When he came to Hampton Roads, I was able to. I remember being within touching distance when he was at Granby High School when he was on the campaign trail, which to me was exciting to be a part of, history, seeing this first, person, this first black male running for this office. It was a little exciting, but I also knew that when it came time to telling about the event that was going on, I had to tell what was happening. I'm going to go back to something recently. I had a friend, because we had a friend that was running for office locally, just think because I knew this person, it was okay to put a sign in my yard, and I had to call and say, please come get this. I cannot have a political sign in my front yard. I'm a journalist. So, it's just...
Yeah, there's certain rules that we're supposed to follow. I mean, I can't put campaign signs in my yard. I can't put anything on my car. I can't donate to candidates.
You can't donate to candidates.
Even out-of-state candidates. I don't even take part in political polls when posters call, because I'm thinking that's a little dicey. It's probably okay, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And that goes with the territory. There are certain things that you're supposed to do, and there's certain things you're not supposed to do, and it should be easy enough to figure that out.
Do you think, Barbara, that younger journalists are learning those rules?
I don't think so. Not as a group.
No, you know what I mean?
I don't want to say cast a wide net.
Sure.
Because I do know that there are some young people who practice journalism the way we've been taught how to practice journalism. But we're running into a whole different level of kids who call themselves journalists who are active on social media and do not follow the guidelines that we hold true. And so they're the ones that tell Lisa, I'm going to go out and protest. Like, why would you do that? Do you think that you're going to be believed as an objective journalist if you are out taking a side? So we challenge them, but there's a whole new level of social media people who the line is blurred when it comes to them. I will say that.
Let's take a call from Warren in Hampton. Hi, Warren. You're on the air.
Hello, Barbara.
Hi. You're on the air.
All right. Hey, I just wanted to say I love your show, Barbara. Every time I get a chance to listen in, it's great. It's fascinating. It's good discourse to share with the Hampton Roads area. But
thank you.
I wanted to say in general to everybody there, thank you guys so much for sharing the stories that you have about those difficult moments. Going to full disclosure, I'm a white man, and just to hear it from you guys, the disgusting things that you all have had to deal with, and knowing that if I was in your shoes, I wouldn't have to deal with those things. So thank you guys so much for taking those difficult interviews. That's one thing, I guess, when the Trump interview came up, I didn't understand why, the pushback on interviewing him. I thought it was a great chance to say, hey, this is our opportunity to show this guy for what he is, a disgusting human being. And the fascinating take that I got from that interview was, the quotes that he made regarding Kamala Harris's race.
Yeah.
So I thought it was great that interview went ahead. And I thank every one of you guys for what you do. And thank you for taking my call.
Thanks, Warren. We appreciate the call. Anybody want to respond?
Well,
go ahead, Roger.
Yes, he made the comment about Kamala Harris's race, and now she's black, and not so. But how was that any different from all of the 30,000 lies he said while in office, according to the Washington Post? And that was the thing that I was just so incensed about it. I'm like, why are we giving this guy a platform? It's not that he was a Republican. It's that he's Donald Trump. He's unlike practically any candidate who's ever risen to national prominence in this country in the last half century. So it wasn't so much that African Americans vote overwhelmingly in presidential campaigns for Democrats. It's that this particular man jumps from issue to issue, lies almost as much as he breathes, and we are not going to call him to account on anything. This is not a forum that we're really going to be able to get something, I think, of value from him. Mm-hmm. And that was my whole point on that.
I would.
Okay, go ahead, Will.
Yeah, I'd have to disagree with Roger on that. I mean, I think Woodrow Wilson, again, I mentioned about it, the importance of understanding history. Wilson was pretty terrible, very terrible when it came to black people. And we still had Monroe Trotter and other journalists who were still challenging him. For me, I found it interesting that we're experts in our various mediums, right? So we understand how TV plays differently than print plays to the audience, which is different than online plays to the audience, right? But we don't seem to recognize, like in the case of Trump, that how that interview played out. It played out differently for people in the room than people who were watching online or people who were watching on TV. So for me, the challenging thing was that I didn't understand, and not being in the room with the decisions being made, is why did they even allow him to have an audience there in the room? Because if you know anything about Trump, to Roger's point, Trump plays off the audience. So for those of us who are watching it now on TV or watching it on social media, we're hearing the comments coming from the audience, and we're thinking, man, these are journalists, and they're commenting back, and it was a bad look for us as NABJ and as journalists. To me, you should have done the interview, but done it in a way that made it he's less able to just manipulate the situation to his advantage. So
how
you
do
sort
you
of
do
that? That happens almost never with him.
How do you do that?
And we know that from seeing him on the public stage.
One of the things you do that is that by not having an audience there, you saw the difference between his debate, right, with Kamala Harris and just the people there. And so everybody that saw that experienced it the same way through the same medium. That's my point.
Well, then,
if
that was the case,
experienced it different.
Well, if that was the case, we didn't need to have it at the convention. Then we could have had him appear before the board of directors of NABJ at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the decision with NABJ is always exposure for the membership. So it's a membership event, and so that's the reason why there were registered NABJ goers who were in the room. But you had to be registered to get in the room. So if he, in advance of that meeting, had people register, that's how he got those people in the room.
Lisa, I'm looking at your face.
I'm like, call me crazy. I don't know. When I registered and knew that he was coming, I was going to make sure I was seated in the room. I always expect. I wait. I said maybe I will be there when he rises to the occasion and begins to act presidential. Maybe something will happen, and I'll be in the room to say, guess what happened? And it didn't.
I won't mention the name. When I was on the editorial page at the Virginian Pilot, we had a candidate who most of the editorial board didn't want, but the other candidate was terrible. And when we said in the editorial, we think that maybe he will rise. And
rise to the occasion.
There is nothing that this person has done up to this point in a race for Congress that suggests that. And after that individual got to Congress, that individual didn't disappoint in not rising to the occasion. So, I mean, what's the saying? If they show you who they are, believe them.
Right. Okay.
But we're passing values. Again, the thing is that we...
No, I think we're being discerning.
Well, that's an editorial group, too, versus you're out covering it as a reporter and a journalist. So that's the line. I mean, that's the line where many people are not understanding us at this point in time, because there's so much opinion talk on the networks.
It's very interesting. I was coming down the elevator this morning with a neighbor, and she asked me what was going to be on the show. And I was telling her the topic, and she said, I watch, she mentioned Jonathan Capehart, who, was on cable.
And the Washington Post.
And the Washington Post. And she said, when I watch him and he's dealing with issues, of race, or he's talking about Trump, there's a visceral and a physical reaction that he has. She said, but I can excuse that because he's giving his opinion as opposed to being a journalist. So she saw difference
we're opinion
between the
journalists.
two, or an
we're
opinion journalist.
So, Barbara,
Yes.
that's why that goes back to you asked a question about, do you think journalism is being taught similarly to how we study it? And my answer would be yes, it is, because I still teach journalism, University of Maryland, Global Campus. I speak at Lincoln, my alma mater, all the time. It is still being taught that way, but I think the difference is what you're bringing up right now, that it's the professionals and how we blurred the lines from opinion to, I'm giving the straight news. I mean, just think about it. Just look at how confusing it must be for the audience to see Anderson Cooper on CNN give an opinion, right? And then to see Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes now doing hard news, featured journalists. That's got where we came up in an era where at the point that you were giving opinion, there was a statement put on the screen.
That's right. Commentary. That's right.
Or editorial.
So you knew. It's like, okay, now I can sit back and he or she is giving their opinion. The lines have been totally blurred, and then we reward these journalists now. They're saying they are the standard. And so that's got to be confused. I've had that come to me from many young journalists who said they're confused because we're teaching one thing in the classroom, and then they look on among the professionals and they see a totally different thing happening. And the audience has got to be confused, even more confused, because they've got all these different channels, unlike us coming up with 3, 4 different news channels, and we're getting basically the same types of stories, same type of perspective. They've got all these choices, and a lot of people are not even watching the news. They're not even. So, Barbara, Ciara, sorry to let you know, you probably knew this. A lot of people weren't even watching you. Towards the end. We're not even watching anymore because the news is so bad. It's always bad news.
I don't agree that the news is always bad, but I do accept as a fact that there is a dwindling and shrinking audience of television news watchers. The appointment television that we grew up with, where everyone gathers around
the
at
table.
6 o'clock and you're going to watch the news. Those days are over when a lot of people have the device in their hand and they're scrolling through and getting their information that way. But to the point of that shrinking audience, they can at least depend. Typically, if you have a local news broadcast, you're getting local news. I always think, can local news die? Where else are we going to get our news? So whether it's the newspaper or
most definitely can die.
Yeah, but I'm seeing that happen. But I also think that, Wil, I'm glad. God bless you. I'm glad you're still teaching the tenets of traditional journalism. It cannot be ignored that is the standard we should continue to work by.
So we got 5 minutes left, and I want to ask a question, because through all of this, as much as we, value our profession and try to live up to the standards of the profession and all of that, it still takes an emotional toll.
Absolutely.
Lisa, you talked about how you felt after the Trump interview.
Yeah, it was quite an emotional roller coaster sitting in that room. And it was funny when it was over, one of the younger reporters from Wavy came over to me and she said, "Miss Lisa," she said, "are you okay?" And I said, "I don't know if I need to go back up to my room and lie down or if I need a hug." And she said, "Come here." And she gave me a hug. And I said, "Yeah, that helps a little bit," because I really felt a little sick. I did. And it was like, wow. But that is always the case when you get to experience something firsthand. I mean, I want you guys to think about when you're out covering even things like bombings and things like that, and you actually get to see what happened, the devastation.
It's so different than watching it on TV.
It's so different than watching it on TV. It takes an emotional toll.
I just got to tell you, of course, Detroit, majority black city, was about 80% black when I was there. I mean, I was on the police beat for 3 years there, and most of the perpetrators and victims in cases that I covered were black. And just the way we are inhumane to each other would take a toll. And I can remember one Monday starting and getting called almost as soon as I got in. Hey, there was a police chase and 4 young men in a car. They got killed because they crashed. And I'm like, my good. And you knew what the race of the people was going to be. And it's like, my God, we just always are killing each other. And I think that as much as anything, beyond politics, can just be draining a lot of times.
Exactly. Barbara, what did you do to protect your peace? Because the things that we are exposed to, everybody's expecting us to deliver the news, but you're exposed to things and you have to process that yourself.
I thank a very small circle of friends to help me with my sanity. I mean, when I'm sitting here listening to Lisa about the Klan, there was a Klan membership drive in Portsmouth in the 80s that I exposed in an investigative report, and they flattened my tires. They called the station, threatened me, and flattened my tires. Wow. I mean, we are targeted, and people don't understand that we are sometimes targeted. And how do you keep your peace? You just try. Yeah. But honestly, it's difficult. And what I like about the newer generation is at least they know their mental health is important enough to say it out loud. We never talked about it.
That's very true.
There was an expectation, you just push forward. So I think now accepting that we need to be able to learn to find our grace and peace, that is a step forward in us protecting ourselves.
Will, you get the last word.
Hey, being a person of faith is critical for me because, I didn't get the peace in the newsroom. That wasn't a refuge oftentimes. And like you said, when you're inundated by bad news, it can wear on you. So to Barbara's point, you need a small circle of people who really love you and care about you. And you need to, have a strength and something greater than yourself. So as a Christian, that was key for me.
So last minute, one thing you want to say to younger journalists, don't give up.
Yeah, that's it. Don't give up. Remember the standards and find yourself some. I tell all of them to always have a mentor. Always have somebody you can talk to and say, guess what happened today in the newsroom? Or guess what, I was, just forced to cover per se. And have somebody you can talk to who can advise you, a wise counsel. It helps so much.
Okay, Barb.
Remember the mission. You always have to be represented and tell our stories and be in the room.
Roger.
Learn the craft, learn what reporting is all about, and do everything. Don't just do the, quote, black stories.
Do it all.
You don't limit yourself in that way.
Will.
Don't follow the crowd. Oftentimes, you're not going to find the real story following the crowd.
There you go. Thank you all so very, very much. I truly appreciate it. And audience, before I let you go, there are three things happening. Well, there's a lot of things happening in the community this weekend, but three things I want to bring to your attention. The Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated are holding a oh, gosh.
Something important.
Yes, a town hall and candidate forum. There we go. On Saturday, October the 5th. It's at 1 o'clock. It's at the Student Center on Norfolk State University's campus. And it is free. It's nonpartisan. It's open to everybody. If you want to know about the local candidates that are running for office, come out and check that out. And if you want some to go out and hang out with some folks, the Virginia African American Cultural Center is holding its annual Community Fall Festival. That is also on Saturday. It's from noon until 5 on Hampshire Lane in Virginia Beach, Virginia. All kinds of basketball stars and everybody's going to be there. So come out and support that organization. And finally, the Boardwalk Art Show is happening, but there is the Dr. D. Green Storytelling. It's a storytelling and puppet show being held on the 5th at 1:45 at the 31st Street Bridge Park stage, and come out and enjoy that too. Thank you very, very much. Next week on Another View, the Another View Roundtable with intelligent conversation about today's issues. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. WHRO News Director Michelle Hankerson stepped into the producer chair for Lisa Godley today. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Connor Worley answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. If you're in Virginia, you can vote now. So do your civic duty, get out there and vote. We'll get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever. whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.